On the night of the 22nd of November 2019, police in Beaufort, South Carolina received numerous 911 calls reporting an incident in the city.
The dispatcher comes across the radio and says, we're getting multiple reports of shots fired and that there was a single vehicle accident.
Dispatch, Ms. 10.
Ms. 10. We're getting additional calls regarding this accident that the driver of the Mustang is not breathing.
When they arrived there, they found the victim, Ethan Bosworth, outside his vehicle on the driver's side on the ground. They checked, there was no pulse. He was very blue in appearance.
The victim had been shot, and then as a result of being shot, lost control of the vehicle, and then the vehicle crashed.
The victim, 20-year-old Ethan Bosworth, is rushed to Beaufort Memorial Hospital by ambulance, where he undergoes emergency surgery for his injuries.
A total of 3 bullets entered Ethan's torso region and subsequently resulted in his death.
Witnesses had seen these 3 kids in hooded sweatshirts running away afterwards.
The search for Ethan's attacker leads investigators into the murky world of social media threats and intimidation, and ultimately, to a green-eyed killer.
It was a crime of passion, it was a crime of jealousy.
Jealousy was the sole reason this murder happened.
Beaufort County, South Carolina, attracts a wide variety of residents and visitors to the area.
It boasts these picture-perfect movie set areas, so naturally they have filmed some movies there, like The Big Chill, Forrest Gump, Prince of Tides, Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil, and so it's very much a tourist attraction.
It's where people come for vacation, but at the same time, it's still a small town. You go to the grocery store and you run into people you know.
There's lots of families that are from Beaufort, stretching way back. You have a lot of military people like myself.
Parris Island is in Beaufort County. That's the depot where they train the United States Marine Corps. And a lot of times people who get out of the military will settle here in Beaufort. You have retirees that move here because the weather is ideal. They like living here because the climate is just absolutely magnificent.
On the night of the 22nd of November 2019, officers from Beaufort Police Department receive a 911 call to report a car that has crashed into a tree.
The 911 calls start at 10:19 p.m. and they start as a car accident.
911, where's your emergency?
There's a car accident. They hit the tree 2 houses down from 2714 Waddell Road.
Simultaneously, though, they are getting shots fired calls in the area.
911, where's your emergency?
It was just gunshots from Waddell Road. A car stopped, a Mustang stopped, and then shots were fired, and they left. My son heard the gunshot, and there's another guy on the corner of the road. He heard the gunshot, and don't know if there's anybody down the road there that's been shot or not.
When the call came out, I was on Boundary Street, which is like one of the main roads through town. The dispatcher came across the radio and said that there was a call of shots fired on Waddell Road.
Any calls for shots being fired in this area? There is a Mustang that hit a tree or a fence or something and is unconscious. Stand by for scene.
EMS 24 en route MVA.
This resulted in a rapid response by multiple City of Beaufort officers to descend on the area to first render aid to the victim and also try to determine what was occurring.
I already knew at that time that the vehicle crashing was going to be related to the shooting and that it was either going to be somebody seriously injured or dead. I immediately, threw on the lights and siren and headed to that location.
Officers arrive at the scene to find a black Ford Mustang sports car smashed against a broken tree, and the driver in a seriously injured condition.
On the road where this happened is Port Royal's jurisdiction, and then immediately after it turned to ours, so we had Port Royal Police and Beaufort County deputies there as well.
The first responders that arrived on scene tried their very best to render medical aid to the victim. They began with CPR, retrieved an AED from their vehicle, and while they were retrieving the AED, that's when the ambulance arrived and was able to take him to the Beaufort Memorial Hospital. The victim was identified as Ethan Bosworth. This was established through his girlfriend, who had reached out to the Beaufort County Dispatch Center over concerns on the whereabouts of Ethan.
Investigators move quickly to tape off and protect the crime scene for forensic examination.
The crime scene was at least 100 yards. As I walked down the street, I wasn't seeing any evidence, such as a suspect dropping a wallet, dropping any personal property. I didn't see any firearms that had been thrown.
I get to the crime scene and there's already one or two patrol officers there. It's the middle of the night, it's dark. The whole area is swarming with emergency services personnel, and you're trying to get information. So everybody that you talk to may have a little piece here and there, and then it's taking all those pieces and putting them together. It's a lot of moving parts at one time.
The absence of a shell casing at the scene leads police to form an early theory about the murder weapon used in the crime.
Shell casings are just like a fingerprint. They can be forensically tied to a firearm if you recover such. There was no evidence of any shell casings, which could be that the suspect had a revolver to use in the commission of the crime. So then I began to concentrate my efforts on the victim's vehicle.
The vehicle had struck a tree and then come to rest against another vehicle. One of the back windows on the passenger side was shattered. It looked like a bullet impact.
It's while detectives are still examining the crime scene that they receive news that victim Ethan Bosworth has died in hospital.
Ethan Bosworth died not long later, shortly before midnight that night at the hospital.
The cause of death was the result of bullet wounds. There were a total of 3 bullets that had entered Ethan's torso region and subsequently resulted in his death.
Ethan's death is now classified as a homicide, and a murder investigation is launched by Beaufort Police Department.
There were 3 individuals that were near the victim at the time of the incident. Based upon what was being communicated to the dispatch center,
the victim had pulled off to the side of the road and was interacting with 3 males. One of them produced a gun and fired, and then all 3 of them ran off. The victim's vehicle then accelerated away, lost control, and crashed.
But there was very limited descriptions of these suspects. It was just more or less described as silhouettes.
The best witnesses that we had were between 2 and 3 blocks away. So, they were able to look down and see, figures, but they couldn't see details or faces or anything like that.
So we understood at the time that the forensics was very critical. I noticed on the exterior of the vehicle there was a great deal of condensation that was building up, and I felt it was appropriate that this vehicle be towed to a secure environment, such as the City of Beaufort Police Department, in order for us to process the vehicle in a contained environment.
Investigators now speak to Ethan's girlfriend, who was the last person to see him alive on the night he was murdered.
She actually was the one who made a 911 call to the police because when she woke up from a nap that night, Ethan was not there. Prior to Ethan leaving, he was on Snapchat with somebody that he was messaging. And she remembers that his emoji had a blue bandana on him.
It now appears that Ethan had planned to go and meet the person behind the blue bandana emoji.
Ethan told her, I have to run out, but if I don't come back, something bad has happened and you need to call the police.
The day he was murdered, he called me and he did seem nervous, like something was going on.
A cell phone was located on the driver's seat of the vehicle. We were fortunate enough that The girlfriend knew the passcode to the cell phone. It enabled us to unlock the cell phone and see immediately that there was Snapchat messaging from an individual identified as Cam.
17-year-old Cameron Kim lived in nearby Ladies Island and had attended the same high school as Ethan Bosworth.
This person was a very bad person, and Ethan knew that. The other thing about Ethan was he just didn't have that thing in his head that stopped him from going. He was the kid that was just going to go.
Cameron believed that Ethan was having a relationship with his girlfriend.
The victim had apparently dated a girl that dated Cameron Kim, and he was very upset about that, very jealous, kind of enraged by that.
Whatever the meeting Ethan was having with Cameron that night, there was evidence to suggest he was scared, concerned so much that he told his girlfriend he was expressing an interest in purchasing a firearm. When she questioned Ethan of why he was trying to purchase a firearm, he said that he has enemies here in Buford, and he didn't have any with him.
Before social media, you might have had high school kids arguing in the hallway, or passing nasty notes in class, or even having a fight after school. Nowadays, social media outlets like Snapchat allow people at a distance to diss each other, to friend each other, to fight, to argue, or to come up with conclusions about loyalties, friendship, and jealousies that may be misplaced, that maybe in person you could work out.
Beaufort County, South Carolina, November 2019. 20-year-old Ethan Bosworth has been murdered while sitting in his Ford Mustang sports car. Witnesses near the crime scene see 3 unidentified youths fleeing the area under the cover of darkness. A murder investigation is swiftly launched by Beaufort Police Department to catch Ethan's killer.
Ethan had grown up here in Beaufort and had just returned to his hometown. He had kept in contact and was friends with many people here in Beaufort and was well known and respected in the community.
Ethan went to boarding school in a school near Atlanta, Brandon Hall. It's expensive. The tuition for a student who was living there was more than $50,000 a year. It was a college prep school, very high standards.
Ethan went back to school, finished his high school, lived with his dad for a little while, and then with my mom.
He had a new girlfriend. He was a good kid, just starting over.
Extensive searches of the crime scene and follow-up interviews with witnesses failed to provide investigators with any firm leads.
At the initial portion of the investigation, we had no idea what the motive was.
We did not have any shell cases that were collected on scene. We had no fingerprints. We had no DNA.
It was a crime scene that had no suspects and a limited amount of witness information.
Investigators begin to receive numerous tip-offs from the community of Beaufort.
People start talking, and the people that know stuff, they may not call us directly, but they start talking, and so people that are in those circles, they hear things and pick up on things and direct us where we need to go.
Social media is crazy. It's crazy how graphic it can be and how much information is out there. Everybody was reaching out to us, calling us. People that went to school with him in Atlanta were finding out things on social media. And then it was hard for us as the family to not try to scrub social media to see what other people are saying about it.
This case involved a lot of tell me what you know, and it really started with Ethan's girlfriend at the time. She was interviewed by police pretty soon after this happened, and she's able to give the police a name for the Snapchat user, and that was Cam.
We may not know a defendant's Snapchat or other social media account, but the community knows. And it might not be somebody that's willing to necessarily testify, but they will pull an officer aside and say, hey, you need to look this way, you need to look that way, this is what I'm hearing. And that kind of guides and steers the direction where the investigation goes.
Throughout the investigation, it was developed and learned that Cameron Kim, that was his Snapchat handle, and his emoji had a blue bandana on him.
Cameron Kim soon becomes a significant person of interest in the case, thanks to numerous tip-offs from the community of Beaufort.
Right from the beginning, there was a great deal of suspicion that was focused upon Cameron Kim. It was a reoccurring name that we kept hearing over and over again, that there was a animosity between Cameron and the victim Ethan over a juvenile girl.
Investigators learned that Cameron Kim's girlfriend added Ethan Bosworth on Snapchat after he returned to live in Beaufort.
Cameron at Beaufort High had a girlfriend, and it was when that girlfriend on her social media Snapchat page listed Ethan as a friend of hers that evidently Cameron got extremely jealous.
And after that contact occurred, Cameron heard Ethan's voice in the background and called him up and began to threaten violence against him, saying that he was going to go by his residence and shoot it up.
We spoke with many of Ethan's friends, and they were able to tell us about this motive that was out there, and the motive was jealousy from Cameron.
Whatever Cameron Kim's girlfriend's motive in listing Ethan as a friend, Cameron Kim evidently jumped to a jealous conclusion that there was something between the two of them.
Ethan's cell phone records and social media activity are examined by the digital forensics team.
The initial investigation shifted towards social media. Once we were able to unlock Ethan's phone, we saw the correspondence on Snapchat between Ethan and Cameron, and that began to focus our attention on Cameron.
Cell phone records were crucial. They were able to show us that Cameron Kim was the last person that spoke with Ethan, and it was 2 minutes prior to the shooting.
We realized the importance of needing to maintain this, because sometimes Snapchat messages, they will disappear and go away and you can't retrieve such. So it was immediately photographed to show the call log on Snapchat that was occurring between Ethan and the suspect.
Kim's violent and threatening behavior towards his own circle of friends leads some of them to come forward to the police with information crucial to the investigation.
The witnesses that we interviewed who were friends with him, they had a hesitation about Cameron. They had a level of fear of him.
They were able to tell us that Cameron had threatened Ethan in the past, that he had told him he was going to put a bullet in him, that Cameron Kim would repeatedly tell people that he was ready to catch a body. He had a reputation of carrying this gun on him at all times. They all knew he owned this revolver, and they didn't want him to know that they had seen it and that they were going to go to the police.
We spoke to an Evan Russell. He was absolutely terrified of Cameron Kim. He explained that he was at a restaurant with an ex-girlfriend of Ethan Bosworth, and he overheard in the restaurant that staff were talking about the homicide and saying that Cameron Kim was involved in it.
Another more disturbing piece of information emerges about Kim's behavior following the murder.
He was beginning to brag about what he did on social media.
Through Snapchat, Cameron Kim was posting about it. The day after he posted, "I caught a body." And they all knew that this was in reference to Ethan, because by that point, the news of Ethan's death had come out.
He was talking to one of his friends on Snapchat, and when she confronted him saying, "Are you talking about the death of Ethan Bosworth?" his response was simply, "Bye."
One important tip-off leads investigators to one of Kim's closest friends, Jason McFadden.
We spoke to two witnesses that were quite pivotal on the incident night that provided great information about the activities of Jason McFadden and Cameron Kim.
Jason McFadden was actually a best friend of Kim. They had been best friends since the 3rd grade, and Jason ended up being our only eyewitness to the shooting.
One of the friends of Jason McFadden had received phone calls on Snapchat begging for her to come pick both Cameron up and Jason up. they needed to get out of there, that they had been involved in something, and were begging this person to pick them up. Based upon the information that we were receiving that McFadden and Cameron Kim were trying to get out of the area, we had an opportunity to interview Jason McFadden at his residence.
Jason McFadden was interviewed by the police and ultimately did give the police a video recorded statement and said what happened that night.
He explained to us that he was at a party down the street, that they had been drinking, and denied that anybody was involved in the homicide of Ethan. When he was pressed further and questioned, he seemed like he wanted to get something off his chest. And I looked at him and I said, "Jason, did you shoot Ethan?" And he said he did not. And then I moved to transition into my next question. Did you see who shot Ethan? And he told me he did. What did you witness, Jason?
I was walking home when that happened, and I heard the shots, and I turned around and I saw the car drive off past me, and I just started running.
Who did you see doing the shots? This is important, Jason.
253 Southern Track.
Cameron.
Tell what do we agree?
What kind of gun did he have?
32 revolver.
A what?
32 revolver.
32 revolver. What happened to that revolver?
I don't know. I just started running when I heard the shots.
He identified that the shooter was Cameron Kim, that he had used a 32 revolver, that when they were walking westbound together after leaving the house party, he saw the victim pull up.
Ethan Bosworth was driving his prize Mustang, that black Mustang, and pulled up alongside Cameron Kim, who shot him 3 times through the passenger window.
Jason McFadden heard several gunshots, looked back, saw Cameron reaching into the passenger side of the vehicle, pulling his arm out, and Ethan's vehicle crashing out of control.
Ethan lost control of the car. It rolled and it smashed into a tree, which fell down on another car.
Jason McFadden said he fled the area, ran back to his residence, and later that night, Cameron Kim would show up at his house. He no longer had the gun with him, but Jason McFadden told us that he was troubled by the fact that Cameron Kim expressed being very happy by this homicide, that he felt good that he finally killed someone.
Armed with the testimony from McFadden, investigators now move to arrest Cameron Kim for the murder of Ethan Bosworth. Beaufort Police Department in South Carolina are closing in on the killer of 20-year-old Ethan Bosworth. Ethan was shot 3 times at close range as he sat in his car, and the young student died a short time later in hospital. Investigators now believe 17-year-old Cameron Kim was responsible after receiving a video testimony from Kim's friend Jason McFadden accusing him of the murder.
This is important, Jason.
253 Southern Track.
Cameron.
After we hear the information from McFadden, we knew we had enough to arrest Cameron on probable cause for murder.
Once you know that it's him and you have the evidence and you've got everything pieced together, you go to a judge for the arrest warrant.
Cameron Kim was arrested almost 2 weeks, 13 days after the murder of Ethan.
The night prior, he was arrested for a minor criminal offense in an adjacent jurisdiction. I jump inside my patrol vehicle and we rush and descend on the Beaufort Detention Center because he was getting out that morning on the minor offense. And as Cameron Kim is walking out of the detention center, all Beaufort City's officers come upon him and arrest him for the murder of Ethan Bosworth.
Having secured their prime suspect, police bring Cameron Kim in for questioning around his involvement in the murder of Ethan Bosworth.
He was brought to the City of Beaufort Police Department because we wanted to interview him. We wanted to get statements from him, and he agreed to an interview with law enforcement. You're being charged for the murder against victim Ethan Bosworth. Okay. So what do you have to say about that?
I didn't kill that boy. I know I'm getting accused, and I know that's what everybody's saying, but I know I killed that boy.
Then why?
I get text messages of that every day. People sending me death threats. You don't kill me. I didn't kill that boy.
I knew it was going to be a tough interview with him. I did not feel as if he had any remorse for what he did. Jason McFadden had said that he was bragging about it. He was happy about it. So when both Master Sergeant Rayleigh and I went into the interview room, we approached it as, you did this. Why did you do this? You're not going to convince us that you didn't do it. We're trying to figure out why. Are you a serial killer? Or was it because Ethan was making advances to your girl? What was it? We're just simply trying to get into your mind and just find out the reason why.
Didn't do it.
But we know you did.
How do you know I did?
People have rolled on you?
People who?
They rolled on you.
That he say, she say, I want DNA, I want the gun, I want my fingerprints, I want all that. I didn't kill that boy.
We have your cell phone, we have other people's cell phones.
I know y'all have my cell phone. I handed it to y'all yesterday.
So, you should know that puts you right there, right? You know cell phones are tracked, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So that means it puts you at the scene of the crime. Okay?
He didn't want to talk about the gang that he formed. I had asked him directly, tell me about this gang you're forming. Now, have you been trying to form a gang here in Beaufort?
No.
No? You don't aspire to form a gang?
No, if you're talking about that YJB, that's a little group, me and my two other friends have.
What can do who are your two other friends?
Jason and Matt.
He described it as a group called the Young Jack Boys. We just hang out. We do drugs. What does this group consist of? What does this group do?
I mean, we don't do anything. We just sit and drink, smoke weed, and we chill.
He was asked about a firearm at this party. Did you have a gun with you that night?
No.
You weren't taking pictures, flashing a gun?
No.
And posting it all over social media?
Not me. I didn't have it.
He initially denied anything about a firearm until we pressed him further and questioned him. Did he admit to the fact that there was a firearm there? Did you see a gun there? Yeah. What did you see for a gun? Describe it.
It was just fucking little revolver.
A revolver? Were you featured in any of the photographs as the gun was featured?
Not that I know of.
Not that you know of? Okay. There were pictures of him holding a revolver in his hand that was disseminated on Snapchat of him loading this revolver with bullets right in his hand.
You guys were hanging out at the house. What were you doing?
Drinking, getting drunk, smoking weed.
Okay. What time did you leave that house?
Never left.
You never left?
I stayed there, all three of us.
All three of you stayed? Well, that's a lie.
He was insistent upon the fact that he never left that party. He was there the entire night, so he was not involved in the homicide.
You know we've talked to everybody that you're close to. We've done search warrants. So we're not here by accident, right? You already know everybody's pointing the finger at you. You can either tell us the truth.
I'm telling you the truth.
And maybe something happened. It was an accident. I don't know.
I'm telling you the truth.
During the interview, we were trying to establish the motive for the crime. It was suspected that Cameron was very jealous over the fact that Ethan was associating with his girlfriend. And he was asked specifically during the interview, you're upset that Ethan's associating with your girlfriend? And he said, yeah, he was. Is my understanding the victim, Ethan, he was associating with her as well?
Yeah.
You were upset by that, right?
Yeah.
Why were you upset?
I was just tripping, I was drunk.
Were you afraid that he was moving in on Eve and she liked him more than you?
No, I was just drunk. I told him she called me saying she wanted to go get cigars and some food. He wouldn't take her home. And I said, well, put him on the phone. I told him to take my girlfriend home right now. She wanted to go home.
There was proof that there was an association. They were, in fact, hanging out.
No, we sorted that out and everything.
How did you sort that out?
I ended up seeing him again, like a week after. He was like, yeah, I ain't trying to do nothing with your girl. We're just friends and all this and that. And I think for like a sister, I said, Lord, I got you, bro. And I definitely, it was cool. I swear to God, it was cool.
So that didn't upset you? They were trying to move in on your girl?
He wasn't. He had a girlfriend. I was just tripping. I was drunk.
Ethan was staying at my mom's house in Buford for a little while, and I know Cameron came over to my mom's house and was violent with Ethan once on one occasion, yelling at him, and Ethan was worried about it.
At that point in time, we felt very confident that he was indeed jealous and angry and bitter that his girlfriend was associating with Ethan.
Kim becomes increasingly frustrated by the questions put to him by the investigators and demands to see an attorney.
I want an attorney.
You want a lawyer? Okay.
Alright, well, we're gonna fill out some paperwork and we'll get you over to the jail.
Cameron Kim is charged with the murder of Ethan Bosworth and placed in custody pending a court date. Investigators must now prepare a solid case against Kim to ensure a successful outcome at trial. Beaufort County, South Carolina. 17-year-old Cameron Kim has been arrested and charged with the murder of 20-year-old Ethan Bosworth, who was shot dead in November 2019. The prosecution must now build their case and convince a jury beyond reasonable doubt that Kim murdered Ethan out of jealousy.
Prepping from a murder trial starts when I get the warrant. We have our own team of investigators through our solicitor's office, and we are in constant talks with the Beaufort City Police Department. And as soon as the warrant comes in, we go and meet in person with the investigator who made the arrest. We meet with as many witnesses as we can. We go and view the evidence once it's all available to be viewed.
Despite numerous testimonies from witnesses and evidence taken from social media accounts, the outcome of the case is still far from certain.
Due to this being a low-country region of low-lying areas, there's a great deal of waterways. We never located the gun. We searched the region by foot. We even utilized the dive team to search a waterway, and we never recovered the firearm.
Witnesses who initially spoke to investigators now seem to be too afraid to testify in court.
I think that they were scared. They do not want to talk to me. They do not want to talk to the police. And more so, they do not want to get on the witness stand and testify. So that was a major issue that we had to face.
It appears that Kim still has a controlling hold over the people in his life, even from behind bars.
You have the ability to make phone calls from the detention center. When I began listening to those jail calls, I would hear him talking to his girlfriend. And Cameron Kim was always questioning where she was, who she was with, and if there was the slightest noise in the background, he would interrogate her over the phone, saying, is that somebody in the background? Is that another guy over at your house?
We had a jail phone call where he's talking to his girlfriend about how Jason was a snitch and they needed to get Jason because Jason had snitched. He didn't say Jason was a liar. He didn't say anything like that. But in our world, a snitch is somebody who goes to the police and tells them the truth.
I don't think the girlfriend ever realized the degree of possessiveness he had over her. He wanted to monitor her entire life. He did not want her to have any degree of freedom. He wanted complete control and possession of her.
But one story from Kim's childhood provides a chilling insight into his troubled mind.
When Cameron Kim was arrested, his second grade teacher reached out to me and told me a very chilling story. When Cameron was in the second grade, he had a propensity to stab other children with pencils and scissors. And as a result of the actions of Cameron, he had to be moved to a different classroom with fourth graders in it by this teacher who was very strict. And he told his class, we're getting a second grader in our class. And he explained to me, the second grader said, oh no, not Cameron. And he said, yes. The children in this classroom were actually scared to have Cameron come there to his class.
The case finally goes to trial in Beaufort County Courthouse in October 2021.
It was very traumatic. Nothing explains somebody killing your son. But I wanted to know everything that happened that night. Even if I had to see it and it was uncomfortable, that's how I processed it to get through.
I was able to get Jason McFadden on the stand. He was reluctant. He didn't want to do it. I was able to show the jury the pre-recorded video interview of him where he did tell the police that they were together at a party, that Kim had his revolver, and he saw Cameron Kim's arm go through Ethan Bosworth's driver's side window. He heard the gunshots, and then Cameron Kim took off running.
The evidence and motivation all revolved around jealousy and rage. It was the fact that Ethan Bosworth was associating with Cameron Kim's girlfriend. He did not like this. He expressed his displeasure for it, and that was the motivation.
The whole trial, you're worried. You're sitting there in the courtroom, wringing your hands and looking at the jury, and are they going to convict him, and what are they thinking right now?
I was able to give them all the evidence I had, all the testimony I wanted them to hear, all the exhibits I wanted them to see. At that point, you just hope and pray that they see the truth that I had seen this whole time, and that they too see it and find him guilty.
With the witnesses that were at the scene, with the witnesses who were there with him when this incident occurred and told us what happened, and then the digital evidence, it all just wrapped it up in a really tight bow to let us know, yes, this is the person who did this.
The jury retire to deliberate their verdict.
I always am nervous when the jury comes out. There's nothing scarier than when the bailiff says, we have a verdict, and then we have to wait for the verdict to be published. Because at the end of the day, you never know what 12 people are going to do.
Cameron Kim was convicted of murder and sentenced to 45 years in prison.
When the verdict is read, I can hear Ethan's family behind me. I can hear his mother, I can hear his father, his stepfather, and his sister, and his grandmother. They're all there. All the pews are filled with his friends. And the sigh of relief that they feel, it's like no other.
I wanted justice for my son. And Cameron going to jail for 45 years does not bring Ethan back. We all know that. But at least his younger sister, Eliza J., she doesn't have to worry about him for 45 years.
Justice was served. He got a sentence of 45 years in the Department of Corrections, but it will be very scary, in my opinion, when he's released.
Cameron Kim showed absolutely no remorse whatsoever. In fact, he was braggadocious about it. To him, it was a badge of honor instead of something to be ashamed of, which is quite disgusting.
The role of social media in this case provides a dark insight into the world young people live in today.
Social media just looks to be a bell that can't be unrung. People are so dependent on it. Kids use it in lieu of talking face to face, which is unfortunate because I think a lot of questions and problems can be ironed out face to face, reading people's emotions in person that look very different on social media.
Social media was extremely important in solving this case because it established that nexus between the victim and Cameron Kim. But some of the imagery that appeared on the social media was quite disturbing.
We uncovered the digital evidence of him, on social media, like not long before this murder with the actual murder weapon, and it's a revolver. You don't see a lot of revolvers involved in crimes like this.
On one of the videos on Snapchat that we were able to recover when we did a search warrant on the accounts associated with Cameron Kim and Jason McFadden is a video of Cameron Kim inside a vehicle, and he removes very quickly his hand, and he's holding a black revolver in his hand. It's pointed right at the camera. And that was very chilling to me when I saw that video, because At that point in time, I felt very confident that was the weapon that was used to kill Ethan. That was the last thing Ethan probably saw, was the barrel of that gun. And while he's pointing that gun right into the camera, he has a huge smile on his face, as if it's very exhilarating for him to be able to point this gun at the person holding the camera.
With Kim now safely behind bars, the community of Beaufort is left to reflect on this senseless crime.
Scientists have found that the human brain isn't fully formed in terms of its rationality and logic until you're in your early to mid-20s, maybe 24, 25. And so we look at teenagers and 20-somethings as on the verge of adulthood, but some of that brain chemistry hasn't caught up. And I think that may be where a lot of this reaction to jealousy comes from.
Cameron Kim lived with his mother and stepdad. He had been in Beaufort since at least 3rd grade, but I don't know of anything bad that would have happened to him that could have led to this.
Cameron Kim had this ability to be very unsettling with people. Everyone you talked to wasn't surprised he was a suspect. Everybody believed very strongly he was behind this homicide.
I do think justice was served. I wish Cameron wasn't going to ever get out of jail. This kid was on the wrong path, and he did something horrific. I would like to believe he could be rehabilitated in 45 years. I don't know. I feel sorry for him and his family. It's not just Ethan that was lost.
Ethan's family and friends remember the positive effect he had on everyone he met.
We love talking about Ethan. And we meet people and they ask us how many kids we have, and we say 2. And we'll get to the point in the conversation where we'll have to say that something happened to Ethan, he was murdered. And it makes people a little bit uncomfortable. And I have to say to them, I'm sorry if you're uncomfortable, but we like to talk about him. And he was a great kid.
He helped his father in his wood shop. He helped his mother in her pottery class. And he himself loved working on his cars and was evidently a whiz with anything mechanical.
His first car was an old white Ford pickup truck that I bought him, and he used to take the car apart. He was good with his hands. He was creative. After he passed away, this woman found my Facebook page and private messaged me, and she was a greeter at Walmart in Beaufort. And she said that Ethan would come in and he made her feel special, and he always made a point to talk to her, and she felt seen by him. And that's priceless. That's who Ethan was. So, yeah.
Charlottesville, Albemarle County. The body of a female student is discovered by her roommates in their college campus apartment at the University of Virginia.
The 911 call was placed by her roommates to police because they had found her face down on her pillow in bed.
The victim has been subjected to a violent attack in her residence.
They also discovered a door with a hole kicked in.
Police arrive at the scene and quickly identify the young woman as 22-year-old Yardley Love, a senior college student just weeks away from graduation. Investigators learn that Yardley had recently broken up with her college boyfriend, a 22-year-old fellow student and athlete who already had a troublesome past.
I don't think she was afraid of him at all, but eventually the threats turned deadly.
This is the story of a jealous lover, his uncontrollable rage, and the tragic consequences it would have for the family and friends of Yardley Love.
She found the good in every soul that she met and the good in every situation she encountered. It's happening to the family next door, which is exactly what Yardley was, the girl next door.
The University of Virginia is located in the city of Charlottesville, approximately 120 miles southwest of Washington, D.C.
Charlottesville is a very genteel community and a beautiful university for some of America's brightest students.
In May 2010, this idyllic college town is rocked by the brutal death of a young female college student. Yardley Love, a 22-year-old student at the University of Virginia, is found unresponsive in her campus apartment, with clear signs of trauma following a violent struggle.
Yardley's 2 roommates came home and they found her face down in her bed. Initially, they just thought she was passed out. Then they saw blood and they realized something very violent had happened to her, and they called 911.
Officers from Charlottesville Police Department respond to the call and arrive at Yardley's apartment on 14th Street.
When police arrived, they saw the blood on the pillow. They saw obvious signs of a struggle. They saw the door had been kicked in, and they realized something terribly wrong had unfolded.
News of the tragedy soon reaches Yardley's family in her hometown of Cockeysville, Maryland.
It was probably 5 o'clock in the morning, and I was asleep. A policeman came to my door, and when I opened the door, they asked me if I was Yardley Love's mother. I said yes, and then I guess everything went blank after that. I don't think the policeman even had to tell me.
I was in my exam week of my last year of college, and I had actually stayed up late studying with a friend, and I was so tired, and my phone was ringing at 6 o'clock in the morning. When I answered the phone, she said that it was Katie and that I should wake one of my friends up because she had something really bad to tell me.
About 5:45, Monday morning, May 3rd, and I got a call on my phone, and it was my administrator who had told me that there had been an accident that involved Yardley and that there was a lot of blood, and I said, well, what did she hit? Like, where was she going? Was she in town? And she said, she's been beaten up, and they found her dead in her bed.
8:29 a.m. on May 3rd, one of my dearest friends was an assistant coach at UVA. She said, are you driving? I said, I'm at work. I need to tell you that Yardley Love has been murdered. And there was this silence. She said the state troopers had just been at Mrs. Love's to let her know. And we both started crying.
Police now want to learn more about Yardley's life on campus in the weeks leading up to her murder.
Police asked the roommates what they knew, and all they could say is we had come home and walked in on this. Police officers then asked who could have done this, and the roommates said, George.
Yardley had been in a relationship with another student at the university, 22-year-old George Hughley, but they had recently broken up.
When the police officer said, do you have any idea who would ever want to hurt her? I said, she did used to date a jerk, and his name was George, but I can't imagine that anyone that could love Yardley could do this to Yardley.
George Hughley was in his final year at the time of Yardley's death and played with the university men's lacrosse team.
Yardley lived in one building with some of her lacrosse teammates, and George lived across the parking lot in another building with some of his lacrosse teammates. There was no evidence of forced entry into Yardley's building because so often the teams just left the doors open between them.
From the start, George was way more interested in Yardley than Yardley was interested in George. The first time we talked, he told me, you have to get your best friend to like me and go out with me. And at that time, she had a boyfriend who was another one of his teammates on his lacrosse team. And I remember thinking that didn't really feel right that he was saying that, especially because it was his teammate that she was dating at the time.
I knew that Yardley started to date a guy on the lacrosse team at the beginning of her second year. They were all friends their first year, but then it actually turned into a romantic relationship at some point during her second year.
It was just so many experiences and parties and dates and being out together that he finally wore her down in a sense, and her two best friends were dating his two best friends, and so it honestly became easier for her just to sort of explore what that would be like to take their relationship from friendship to romantic.
Police very quickly knew that they needed to interview George, and they began to understand from conversations with others that the couple had had some tension, that George had made some threats.
The first time that I truly questioned him as a person was a night that we were home over a break that we were back from college, and we went out together to a bar, and then we came back and we were sleeping at my parents' house, and she hadn't been texting him back or answering his calls. I think he called her 30 times in a row, and she just brushed it off, and I remember being so rattled by the fact that he would not stop calling her, even when she finally did answer and said, "I'm at Catherine's house and we're going to bed and I'll talk to you in the morning," and that wasn't good enough. And he immediately went on this very aggressive offense where he was accusing her of, "You're not at Catherine's, I know you're with a guy," and she had never done anything like that to make him think that. And I remember in the morning asking her, "Is that normal?" And she was like, "Yeah, he just gets protective and he wants to know what I'm doing all the time." And I remember that was the first time that I started to be a little bit more concerned that he really wasn't a good person for her to be spending time with.
Investigators now want to speak to Hughley about his movements on the night of Yardley's death and bring the student in for questioning.
George said Yardley was upset. He described a confrontation. George said he had gone to her apartment, that he was trying to get her, in his words, to chill. He said that she was standing with her back against the wall and that she began bouncing her head off the wall. He said he might have grabbed her. He said he might have thrown her on the bed. He said he left her alone.
He didn't think that he had hurt her. He certainly didn't think he had killed her. He said she was alive when he left and that he could never do that, but he had been drinking heavily the day before, and his memory was not on point.
Police search George Hughley's campus apartment and uncover suspicious bloodstains in the bathroom.
I think that he slowly started to spiral out of control once she really broke up with him for the last time. I think he knew that it was done forever. I think she had made it very clear, we're graduating college, we're finally going to be separated from one another geographically, I'm not going to be forced to see you all the time, and this is it. I'm going to just tough it out the rest of college, even if it means missing things, because I cannot stand to be around you anymore, and this is now really unhealthy, and I don't want to be anywhere near you.
Hughley undergoes a medical examination, which reveals fresh cuts and bruising on his body.
I didn't understand the magnitude of that jealousy and that fear of what if she's not mine forever.
Hughley continues to protest his innocence in Yardley's death, but investigators now believe they have enough evidence to formally charge him with murder.
Police zeroed in on what they believed to be true, that Yardley had been the victim of a massive assault, had been injured gravely, and that George had a role in it. There were no other suspects. The DNA evidence clearly put him at the scene, and he was arrested the next day for her murder.
George Hughley is remanded in custody awaiting trial for the murder of Yardley Love, while Charlottesville and the close-knit university campus community try to come to terms with the senseless tragedy.
I couldn't tell the team what had happened until George was arrested. So we needed him in custody before we could let anyone know. I mean, people fell to the floor, the guttural pain, the shock. I remember the hugs, I remember the silence. Just being able to hear kind of the tears and the crying. Every single player that walked into the lawn room that we were in, when I said that Yardley had been hurt and that she wasn't okay,
May 2010, Charlottesville, Virginia. 22-year-old college student Yardley Love has been brutally murdered at her campus residence.
This is a murder that stunned the college community. University of Virginia and Charlottesville are not places where these sort of things are supposed to happen.
The police investigation quickly focuses in on Yardley's ex-boyfriend, George Hughley, who has a history of violent and controlling behavior.
That morning, by 9 o'clock, he was in custody and being interrogated. He didn't think that it was possible that she was dead.
Police did not consider any other suspects in her murder. And as they began to ask questions of Yardley's friends, it became apparent to police and to the friends themselves that each of them had small pieces of the story, but none of them had been successfully able to put together the puzzle that Yardley's life was in danger.
George was a very jealous person. He just had his own insecurities that made him judge and question other people. I think he wanted everyone to know that they were together, and so he had a really hard time when they weren't together, if they were both back home with their own hometowns or, out even at college doing their own thing. That usually started a fight because he would pick a fight and try and get attention, and he didn't like that she was spending time with other people. He wanted to be the center of attention, and Yardley was very independent.
Yardley's family and friends struggle to understand how they failed to see the warning signs in Hughley's behavior.
There was one incident when they were all at a party and he grabbed her, and that scared her. But that was the only time she ever mentioned that she was afraid of him. Because I was going to go talk to his lacrosse coach, and she said, "Oh no, it's not that big of a deal. Don't worry about that."
I think they had stretches where the relationship was strong, and then there were stretches where Yardley couldn't really even stand to talk about him. He was driving her crazy, but because of the close-knit sense of their college community, especially as lacrosse players, she couldn't really escape him. And so she always sort of tried, I think, to find a way to make it easier for everyone and pacify the group and just go with the flow, and then they would find their way back to one another.
I'm fairly sure that most of the adults in Yardley's life have 20/20 hindsight and wish we had handled things differently or been more aggressive in terms of, separating them or getting her out of that situation.
Both Yardley and George played on the lacrosse teams for the University of Virginia and bonded initially over their love for the game. News of Yardley's death sends shockwaves through the tight-knit lacrosse community.
Our reaction was, how do we take care of our team? We let the men take care of the men's team. They were grieving the loss of Yardley as a great friend to them, not as a teammate, but they were also then like, how could one of our teammates do that to one of our friends?
It was all in. It was truly a resounding reflection of the lacrosse community and in a larger sense than in a non-prep community. Some of the younger girls on the team had older sisters that played with Yardley. There were also people who had brothers that played on the men's team at UVA. We had a big game at the end of the week. We asked Sharon. Sharon said, ask the girls what they want to do. And they said, we want to play.
The funeral that weekend is when we really saw the men's team come again. And a lot of the men's players were the pallbearers. That was huge. It was huge for me to see. I knew that they were going to be involved, but when they walked in to a packed church carrying Yardley, it was, I thought, another amazing statement from Sharon Love and from Lexi and the family that the team didn't do this to Yardley. This was George that did this to Yardley, and she wanted Yardley's friends to feel loved by her just like Yardley had loved them.
Yardley Love grew up in the city of Cockeysville, near Baltimore, Maryland, surrounded by a loving family and a close network of friends.
We had neighborhood teams everywhere. When she was 5 years old, she went and played lacrosse, which was kind of just chasing dirt on the ground. She just took to it, practiced all the time. A lot of play was bouncing lacrosse balls off the garage doors.
I met Yardley when I was 10 years old. Our older sisters actually went to the same school that we ended up going to, and they're the same year as well. So we had a similar family dynamic, and our sisters thought that we would be friends once we started at the same school. And then honestly, from the day we met, we became best friends.
I met Yardley as a middle school student. There were probably 25 spots on the team, and there were probably over 100 people trying out for those 25 spots. So for a freshman to make varsity, it's quite a feat. As a lacrosse player, she had great skills. She was on task all of the time. She was one of the first people up to the field to get warmed up and start practice.
I met Yardley at lacrosse camp. The whole team seemed to come to Charlottesville to come and play lacrosse for 3 or 4 days. Yardley came to camp full of life, always friends, but always looking out for the people that she didn't even really know, which is what I was drawn to at first. And then I started watching her play, and she was very talented.
But Yardley's sense of responsibility for her teammates and inner drive for success has its roots in an earlier family tragedy.
Losing Yardley's dad was a huge pivotal moment for her and for her family, and honestly for our friend group as a whole. Just seeing that life is short and seeing the emotional maturity that we sort of needed to pull together. And I think losing him was very, very hard for her, and I think that a big part of her drive and what really kicked her into gear was wanting to make him proud.
Yardley receives a lacrosse sports scholarship from the University of Virginia and moves to Charlottesville to begin her freshman year majoring in political science.
When Yardley was a freshman, she would come over to my co-coach, Lisa, and I, and she would thank us at the end of every practice. She would thank us at the end of class. She would thank us at the end of every game. And I'll never forget that.
Living on campus offers Yardley the opportunity to socialize and mix with players from the university men's lacrosse team. Yardley is introduced by mutual friends to fellow freshman George Hughley, an All-American lacrosse player.
I had heard of him, but I can't say that I actually knew him. We do share fields and we pass each other, and they are in helmets and pads and whatnot.
The spell that she was able to cast on so many people, he had just totally kind of fallen for her. I think for a long time she tried to keep it at a friendship because she did think he was funny and she loved to laugh. She was drawn to his sort of the character that he could be.
She was excited. It was her first real in-town college boyfriend. Her friends were dating his friends, and it just made sense. It was who she was hanging with anyway, and he had a lot of friends around him on the guys' team and on our women's team.
I didn't meet him very often because when the girls played in town, the boys played out of town.
But Hughley's larger-than-life persona fails to impress everyone he meets.
I met him once at UVA when they were both playing in Charlottesville, and he came to my house once and had dinner and spent the night. I thought he was very laid back, somewhat unambitious, and he seemed immature.
He came off as very loud and charismatic and silly. I'd noticed from the first few encounters that I had with him that he could be very hot and cold. I just thought he was a little bit too much. It was my best friend's boyfriend who we spent time together because of that reason only.
As the relationship between Yardley Love and George Hughley begins to deepen, he starts to display jealous and controlling behavior towards her.
There was more than one episode of violence witnessed by others when George had attacked Yardley. In one occasion, members of a rival lacrosse team from the University of North Carolina responded to pull George off of Yardley as he attacked her.
All of these behaviors started to really escalate and to surface as they got deeper into their relationship, and then as she was pulling out of that relationship.
George was just so good at working his way out of his bad behavior and covering up for it and almost turning it around a lot of times or making light of it and being the jokester, that he got away with so much for so long because he found his way out.
In another instance, George attacked a fellow member of his own team who had walked Yardley home.
I remember her thinking that it was so strange, and she was honestly so disgusted by it. His friends were the exact same way. They would agree with everything that Yardley said, and they would feel the same way about his behavior. But then he just had this way of being this jolly, funny, sweep it under the rug, it's not that serious, and he would talk everyone out slowly but surely.
Cracks begin to appear towards the end of graduation year.
They dated on and off from our second year of college through the first half of our fourth year of college, so on and off for like 2 years.
George and Yardley were 2 weeks from graduation, and they had broken up. He had been obsessed with her. Police believed that while he wanted to play the field, he didn't want anyone else to have Yardley.
Really, he was running around on her behind her back and things like that. That's why she left him. And he was fine with that until she met somebody else.
That like set something off inside of him that slowly just got like deeper and deeper. And then I think he was in such a bad mental state that the inner demon within him came out, and he made the worst decision of his life.
Charlottesville, Virginia, 2010. Police have arrested 22-year-old George Hughley for the murder of fellow college student and former girlfriend Yardley Love at her university campus apartment. Yardley was discovered with blunt force trauma injuries sustained during a prolonged physical attack.
Yardley losing her dad made her grow up a lot faster than the average 20-something-year-old, and so she was very easily able to like go do things on her own. She really valued her friendships with her girlfriends. Her mom and her sister she spent a ton of time with, so she was never someone that like loved having a boyfriend and wanted to just like stay in and hang out with a boyfriend. She was on the go because that was just the way she was. She was independent.
Investigators now look into Hughley's past as they build the court case against him for first-degree murder.
In the Chevy Chase community of suburban Washington where George hailed from, there were those who saw in the allegations an echo of George's own father's behavior. George and his father both had run-ins with police. Those who knew the younger George in college saw a young man who was reckless, who felt he was above the law, who felt he could get away with anything that he wanted to. And in many ways, they portrayed that as an echo of the way he was raised by his father.
Evidence of Hughley's erratic and violent behavior emerges from multiple sources.
George unfortunately had a known history of violence and of threats.
He just had a really fast temper, really compulsive, I think, like, you know, quick to fly off the handle, and physical, like he had gotten in fights with other people.
As the investigation unfolds, police discover that Hughley had tried to cover his tracks after attacking Yardley.
He tried to remove the evidence. He'd taken carpets from Yardley's apartment, taken laptops, perhaps to delete emails that documented their tensions and his threats. He took away a Virginia lacrosse shirt with red stains, socks, anything that had blood stains on it. Police found all this evidence in the dumpster outside the apartment. In the investigation, police were able to uncover texts and emails that he had sent threatening Yardley. In his past, there were episodes of his excessive drinking and his arrests for drinking and his punishments for drinking, much of which was unknown to the university athletic community at the University of Virginia. But it was well known among George's peers and among Yardley's friends that he was prone to violence when he drank.
Police retrace Hughley's steps on the day of Yardley's murder.
Earlier that day, George Hughley had been playing golf with his father. George and his father had been drinking all day, and they'd been seen having an argument outside of a parking garage. Later on, George went to the neighborhood bar Boylan Heights, where some of their friends had been hanging out. Yardley had been there for a little while, and then one of their mutual friends walked her home. This sparked a jealous rage by Hughley, because he was obsessed with her.
this fell in line with his personality. This wasn't like, a golden boy all of a sudden has a mental breakdown. This was a lot of questionable things that he had been doing for years, and then this was the one that really actually finally got him in trouble.
Despite the overwhelming evidence linking him to the crime, Hughley continues to fight the prosecution's case against him.
George Hughley never did admit to the crime, never apologized to myself or my daughter for what he did.
The DA can only work with what the police gather. The DA will direct the police. The DA will say, we're strong in this area, we're weak in this area. So the DA always guides an investigation that police then must carry out.
On the 18th of April 2011, after a not guilty plea from Hughley, a grand jury indicts him on first-degree and felony murder charges.
It's never enough for an alleged assailant to say, I did it. Police and prosecutors still have to go to great lengths to build a case, to collect the evidence, to collect statements, to collect the statements of others, to gather the testimony. In the same way that reporters try to look for multiple sources, police have to find multiple sources to back up what an assailant says or doesn't say, because at any point the assailant could change his or her mind.
On the 7th of January 2012, 5 additional charges are added against Hughley: felony murder, robbery of a residence, burglary, entering a house with intent to commit a felony, and grand larceny.
The DA was presented with a very strong case. The evidence was there, the motives were there, the testimony was there. His family brought to bear money and connections to reduce the punishment against him. Early on, one of George's attorneys told the media Ms. Love's death was not intended, but an accident with a tragic outcome.
Justice for Yardley still hangs in the balance as her family and friends prepare for the trial. Charlottesville, Virginia. Student George Hughley is awaiting trial for the murder of his ex-girlfriend, 22-year-old Yardley Love, in May 2010. Yardley was found unresponsive in her college campus apartment by her roommates.
Police asked the roommates who might have done this, and the roommates immediately pointed them to George Hughley.
Yardley never told me that she was scared of him, but Yardley was a people pleaser, and I think Yardley was so worried about worrying other people that she felt guilty making someone else take on her stress and some of her anxieties. But I know she told other people that she was scared of him.
The trial begins on the 6th of February 2012, nearly 2 years after Yardley's death.
It took 2 years to get to the trial, so when it finally did happen, it was hard coming face to face with George Hughley again.
There was no way I wasn't going to go to the trial to support her family and to be there for her still. But sitting through and having to relive the moment-to-moment playback of what happened the night that she died was awful. And having to hear a police officer use such cold terminology or the medical examiner explain her injuries made me physically ill.
In court, the judge was very, very sensitive to the privacy of the family members. Only the worst images were shown to the jury, but not to the assembled crowd or to the media. The family did not see the visual of George's 46-minute interrogation, but they heard the audio. They heard George. They heard his anguish when he discovered that Yardley was dead. They heard him deny that he had any role in it. They heard his disbelief that her life had been taken. At one point during the interrogation, when confronted with Yardley's loss, he actually said to police, "Kill me."
Despite Hughley's history of violent and controlling behavior, there is insufficient evidence to prove he had planned to murder Yardley on the night he went over to her apartment.
Originally, he was charged with first-degree murder. The charge was dropped to second-degree murder because prosecutors didn't believe that there was any evidence that this was premeditated.
On the 22nd of February 2012, the jury finds George Hughley guilty of the second-degree murder of Yardley Love and an additional charge of grand larceny.
There did not seem to be ever any doubt that there would be a conviction in this case. Ultimately, so many of these cases do rest on convincing 12 people that someone has committed a crime.
It's a little nerve-wracking not being sure what the outcome would be. I didn't think he would get off, but I thought maybe the charges would be manslaughter or something reduced.
We actually went down for a couple days to support Sharon, and from our conversation with Sharon and from seeing how that district attorney handled it, I don't think that there was anybody that was more dedicated to making sure that Hughley was convicted than that man that handled that case, and he did a magnificent job.
The DA in this case had enough evidence to present to jurors who made the decision that George Hughley was guilty.
You watch the whole process hoping that the jury saw it the same way we did, and they did.
On the 30th of August 2012, Hughley is sentenced at Charlottesville District Court.
Jury sentenced George to 23 years in prison for second-degree murder and 1 year for burglary.
George Hughley will get out in 5.5 years. He'll still be young. He'll still have a full life ahead of him. I hope he's changed, but I don't think he has.
With Hughley now safely behind bars, Yardley's family and friends reflect on the impact she had on the lives of everyone she met.
It seemed like everybody loved Yardley. I never heard an unkind word. You don't know really what your child does once they're not under your roof. And so when this happened, you don't know what somebody's going to say or do, or some experience that I know nothing about. But every single thing said about Yardley was so kind, and people just rallied around so much. I think she was just a really good person.
A lot of people felt that Yardley was very special, but I think it was a lot of the things that she did when no one was watching that really set her apart as a friend and a person. She didn't do the right thing for accolades. She did it because she had an amazing moral compass, and I think for her it felt good to do the right thing because that was just how she was, and that was in her DNA.
If she was your daughter, you would pat yourself on the back and say, I crushed it. I really raised an amazing young woman. She was as beautiful on the inside as on the out, and she was as good a friend as you could ever have.
The seniors, when they were going the week of prom, would get up and they would describe their dresses to each other. At the end of practice, we'd take 10 minutes and we'd say, okay, you two stand up and let's hear about your prom dresses. And of course, it was Yardley's turn, and she stood up and she used a term. I said, Yardley, I don't know what you're talking about. It sounds beautiful. I'm sure it will be beautiful on you. And she said, you know what, Miss B? I will come and show you the day of prom. I said, Yardley, you're going to have 5,000 things to do. You're not going to want to come on campus and show me your dress. I'll be there. So she left a pre-party with her dear friend, and they came in their full prom dresses to an afternoon at the prep at 5 o'clock in the afternoon when they're supposed to be off being very girly and getting ready for their prom. I was always moved by that, because nobody else was going to do that. But it meant the world to me.
Following the tragedy of her daughter's death, Yardley's mother, Sharon Love, creates a non-profit organisation to raise awareness among young people of the hidden signs of domestic violence.
What connected with me more than anything was not the trial, was not the murder, but was the reaction of Yardley Love's family after the fact, to find the best things about her, to celebrate and use those as a way to empower other young women and men to be alert to the dangers that had taken Yardley's life.
We had 2 years between when Yardley was murdered and when the trial started, and it gave me time to do research. And I realized, surprisingly, that 18 to 24-year-olds are the most vulnerable group of people to domestic violence. So that was when I decided we had to do something.
One Love started with Yardley's mom and sister and all of her cousins and friends and all our coaches and teammates wanting to do something. Everyone just felt so hopeless and so devastated. And so we wanted to come together to do something. And so it started, honestly, as just selling t-shirts and raising money to create a turf field at our high school for the future students to play on.
The university convened a vigil drawing more than 1,500 people. The university president spoke to the assembled students and said that at no point should any woman, any student, have to fear these kinds of circumstances. It elevated the conversation about partner abuse, about domestic abuse, about awareness and red flags and things that people should be aware of. And the university took a leading role in trying to put that forward, which the family itself then followed through on.
I never thought about domestic violence in that age group ever. When I grew up, it seemed that people were married with children and trapped with no income and couldn't get out. That was my image of domestic violence.
I cannot tell you the places I've been and I see like a One Love sticker or a One Love t-shirt, and the number of people that come up to me to tell me that they participated in a workshop or that One Love saved their life or one of their friends' lives. It's definitely one of my proudest accomplishments, is being part of a movement that has made such a difference already.
They really helped. They helped kind of get it out there. This is not just happening with families that are marginalized. This is happening in a lot of different places, and we need to start to pay attention to it.
I can say in full confidence, the work the One Love Foundation has done in Yardley's honor and memory has absolutely saved lives, and it is absolutely going to continue to do just that. I'm incredibly proud and grateful for the work that's been done.
Our student body approaches their relationships differently because of the education of the One Love Foundation and because it hits so close to home. I want to say that we are adding a thread of protection for our young lives that needed to happen.
Yardley Love's legacy is commemorated at Notre Dame Preparatory High School, where a lacrosse playing field has been named in her honor.
My silver lining will always be that I taught her, I coached her. She made a huge impact on me, and I miss her every day. But while she was here, she made the world a better place, and even in her passing, she's made the world a better place.
It's always the hope when I cover a story like this that it informs and it educates, and that people, if they don't see themselves, maybe they see someone they know, and that this story is a way for people to begin looking out for others in their world.
The University of Virginia also remembers Yardley every year, in their own special way.
Every May 3rd, since 2011, the women's lacrosse team has painted Beta Bridge, which is this huge bridge that really connects kind of the central grounds over to the fraternities and sorority world. So everybody comes up and down Rugby Road, but you paint the bridge. You could paint it in 1 hour. It could be somebody could paint over it immediately. Like, people don't even let that paint dry necessarily. They write our website. They help people understand as they pass that bridge, walk on that bridge, see that bridge, take pictures of the bridge, that, you know, hey, we lost somebody really important to the university. We lost somebody who had the brightest future as of anybody. So just take a moment, go to the website, learn, and just pay attention to what we're doing.
I think every parent wants to do something to remember their child, and I would suggest that they have a place or a bench or anything that they want to start just to have a memorial for a young person.
Thankfully, I do think that so many of these colleges have seen time and time again stories like Yardley's pop up, and they do not want to be the next campus that is under the spotlight for the most terrible reason in the world. So I think the fact that now coaches and programs are stopping to slow down to find a way to make sure that their athletes are as healthy as they can be, especially in their relationships, and trying to really arm them with curriculum and conversation and workshops that are going to make them better humans, better players, just all around better people is so important. And it does make me feel more hopeful for the future.
I would say it's across the board, but I do think student athletes and professional athletes are certainly highlighted. So you hear that story more often. Winning isn't everything. We need to remind the kids, this is your mindset on a field and in a game, but in a relationship, it is exactly not that. If you bring that mindset off the court, off the field, and into a relationship, you're doomed.
It's always hard for me, even after covering crime stories for 20 years, to understand why certain stories take off and capture the public imagination. This one resonated for so many because these were two people from a like background, well-to-do, terrific potential. Their lives collided in unexpected ways, resulting in horrific violence and a terrible loss. So many people look at lives like these and think, well, they've got it all figured out. They've got it together. It's not going to happen to these people. And so when it does, it jerks our eyes and holds us hostage.
Can't reverse what was done, so justice is not necessarily in my vocabulary, but I think everybody did the absolute best they could, and we got the best outcome possible. But it didn't bring Yardley back.
In Meridian, Idaho, in 2011, Emmett Corrigan was building a life most would envy.
Emmett Corrigan was an up-and-coming lawyer, 30 years old, married with 5 children, and in his profession he was considered a rock star. He was charming and debonair, he knew his craft, and he was going places.
But behind closed doors, Emmett was harboring secrets, which in turn would have deadly consequences. On the evening of March the 11th, 2011, Emmett left his Meridian home under the guise of picking up a prescription.
He walked out the garage door, slammed the door, which woke up the baby, but I knew something wasn't right. I felt it inside of me.
Everybody thought they had a squeaky clean life.
The hate that you feel when you find out someone was sleeping with your spouse is real.
A man gets betrayed by his wife. I mean, I can see why he'd be angry.
Meridian, Idaho, is a small, prospering city located in Ada County. It has a low crime rate.
Meridian is what we would call a bedroom community. It's a safe, tight-knit community, a suburb of the city, and people really want to be there because it's a great place to raise your kids and to have a family.
In 2011, I was married to Emmett Corrigan. Together we had 5 children. Back then, Meridian was really just kind of a small suburb town of Boise. All the houses were pretty new where we lived. It was just kind of white picket fences and young families. Everybody at the park playing with their kids. One of the reasons we wanted to live here was because it was a safe place and good family town.
This area is really a wonderful place to move. Apparently, a lot of other people around the country have found that out, and now we're one of the fastest growing cities in the United States. It's a safe city. The people are friendly, good job opportunities.
Ashley Corrigan, raised with strong family values in her Mormon upbringing, is deeply committed to creating a loving, supportive home for her husband, Emmett, and their 5 children.
When I was in high school, I had 2 little sisters that were born when I was in the 9th grade and the 11th grade. And I used to take them on little big brother sister dates. And I said, I want to have 2 little daughters just like that. I got 5. Ashley was the first. We were really close.
I had 2 older brothers and 2 younger sisters.
Their mom, Terry, was from Idaho, and she raved about Idaho. She knew I wouldn't want to live in a little farming community, so Boise was our choice, the Boise area. So we moved here right out of chiropractic college in 1990, August of 1990.
Emmett and Ashley appeared to have the perfect relationship. They were young, married in a Mormon temple, successful, on the rise, had children, and lived in a bedroom community where everybody thought they had a squeaky clean life.
We've always been involved in the church, and my children, each one of them, have had their own story of gaining their testimony, and it's just been a solid part of our family. Emmett and I met at the school gym at Utah State University. I was working there, and a friend of his worked with me, so he kind of just set us up in this really awkward, come upstairs in 5 minutes, bring these towels. And when I first met him, it was kind of one of those like cheesy Hallmark movies. Like we both just kind of knew that we were going to be together, and that was how it was. We were just inseparable from then on.
And very quite quickly after that, they announced that they were getting married. So it was rather quick after they met and rather quick after they told us that they were getting married.
The first few months we just it was all the holidays. So we went to Thanksgiving with all the parents, and I met his dad, he met my dad. We just spent all the holidays kind of, I guess, falling in love, really.
He was very outgoing and very, he was a good host when people would come over, and a good entertainer, making sure everybody was taken care of. Our relationship was always pleasant and friendly.
Emmett graduated from Utah University with a science degree and also attended Ricks College, where he played football.
The relationship seemed absolutely rock solid. They had the same goals, same ideology, and everything was good.
He was an only child, and his parents divorced when he was really young, so he would just go back and forth. His mom really made him her whole world. They were just kind of the 2 amigos, and him and his mom were just best friends.
Emmett really was on the rise. He pursued his doctorate at Gonzaga University, and by the time they had their 4th child, he had graduated law school, and that was in 2009. So he quickly received a job offer at a bankruptcy firm in Boise. This caused them to have to relocate because he was ready to take his bar exam.
A year to a year and a half, things seemed to be different.
It's around that time that Ashley, newly pregnant with her 5th child, had noticed her husband was becoming more and more distant.
Ashley, believing that the problems in their marriage were her fault, sought the counsel of a therapist. And at one point, the therapist asked if Emmett could come to a session. And even though he was aware of the time and the place, he never showed up. And Ashley really began to think that this was something that she was doing, that it was her fault for the problems in their marriage.
I kind of talked Emmett into going to a marriage counselor, and our first appointment, he didn't end up showing up. He ended up going out of town with his stepbrother and met him at a bodybuilding competition. So it was just me and the marriage counselor. And I kind of explained some of my insecurities and struggles. My parents had been divorced, and basically begged this counselor to fix me so I could figure out what was going on with my marriage. And by the end, the counselor was like, sometimes those feelings deep down, there's something really wrong. And I just kind of dismissed him, like, no, nothing's wrong. Just fix me and help me be a better wife, and whatever I need to do, I will do it.
On March 11th, Ashley actually tried very hard to reclaim the romance that she and Emmett had. And she cooked an elaborate meal and was looking forward to just spending some nice, quiet, romantic time with him, and he didn't show up. When he did come home, he said he wasn't hungry and went into another room and said he had to work. That really depressed her.
That morning I woke up and I was thinking, I'm going to make everything great today. I'm going to send in pictures of the kids. I'm going to get the kids all dolled up. We're going to have all of his favorite foods when he gets home. And he came home late. He acted very distant. I tried to kiss him and he kind of brushed me away. And he never ate one bite of the food. It was just kind of a failed attempt to show him everything that he had and everything that I wanted him to fight for. We had a friend who was a marriage counselor, and I'd reached out to a few people saying something's not right with him and I need help. I don't know what to do. And at one point in the night, he gets on the phone and I could tell that it was this person. And he went into our room where the baby monitor was on and I could kind of hear him talking, and I knew, I was like, okay, maybe this guy will get through to him. As the conversation gets going and I just hear little brief things over the baby monitor, I start going, like, everything he's saying isn't true. He was talking about things that I'm doing and like Ashley's never home and gaslighting, basically making me the bad guy. And I got to the point where I just turned the baby monitor off and felt even more lost and small. And he came out at one point and mentioned that he had talked to this person. And I said, well, maybe I should talk to him too. He's a counselor. Maybe he could help us. And so I went in the back room and unplugged the baby monitor and got on the phone. And this guy basically believed everything that he said and just started going off on me. Like, what are you doing? You're going to ruin your family. And in the middle of the conversation, I'm just kind of on the rocking chair and Emmett walks in and he looks at me, and it was almost like this desperate face that I probably made at him. And he was like, I'm going to run to Walgreens. I got this little cough. I'm going to go run to Walgreens. And that same just feeling inside of me that something wasn't right, I felt it. And I held the phone away from my ear and I just said, please don't go. Me and you need to talk. We need to figure this out. We have this amazing family. And as I'm saying all of this, he just dismisses me and said, I'm going to go. Don't tell me what to do. And he walked out the garage door, slammed the door, which woke up the baby. But I knew something wasn't right. I felt it inside of me. And I bounced this baby for hours, waiting for him to come home. And he never came home.
In 2011, Meridian, Idaho, Emmett and Ashley Corrigan are having marital problems. During a confrontation, Emmett insists he needs to leave to go to the local Walgreens, the popular US pharmacy chain offering medications, health products, and everyday essentials. What he doesn't tell his wife is that he's going there to meet his colleague, named Candy Hall.
It wasn't long into his tenure at the new firm that Candy was hired, and they quickly became friends, and that friendship turned into something much more intimate. There were many texts, and suddenly, even though Ashley was pregnant with her 5th child, Emmett wasn't coming home very much.
When we moved to Boise, the market was really low, so we were able to get an amazing house, and he started an amazing career, and I was pregnant with our 5th baby. Like, everything just felt like this was all worth it. Law school and all the sacrifices. Here's the easy time.
The Corrigans were a picture of the squeaky clean, all-American family. With Emmett's career on the rise, the future looked bright.
Looking back, I should have been more stressed about pretty much raising the kids by myself during law school. But it was more of one of those things that, like, I love this man, I love these kids, and you just kind of put your head down and push through. And I never really looked at it as overwhelming. So after he passed the bar, he started working at Jake Peterson's office solely. And then a few months later, he met Candy, and that's when they decided to do the criminal law together.
Emmett had hired Candy Hall, and it wasn't long after Candy and Emmett struck up their torrid affair, exchanging racy emails, spicy text messages, and indulging in late-night rendezvous. They were having sex, apparently, sometimes in the office.
He went to lunch with his paralegal who introduced him to Candy. And Candy kind of laid out this plan for him that day, is what I'm told, that she was going to kind of just slip him clients under the table and help him build a criminal office. And then once she got her Christmas bonus, she was going to just dip and come over and work just solely for Emmett.
Even though they tried to keep their blossoming relationship a secret at the office, it became an open secret.
Anybody who meets Emmett, you could just see that he was going to work hard and make it. He just had that drive. And it sounds like she was ready to leave her office anyway, and I think she just really wanted to set herself up to success.
Candy Hall was actually 10 years older than Emmett. She had lost her job at another law firm and had gotten a new job at the law firm that Emmett was at. She had 2 children at home and appeared to be smitten with Emmett once she met him.
When I first met Candy, it was more like I walked in to awkwardness. I was outside the door and someone in the office was like, just go walk in. And I pushed open the door and I see this woman, and she had really tall boots on and a mini skirt. And I couldn't even put it all together at first. I thought maybe it was a client. And then I was introduced to her as our new paralegal. And it was one of those, like, this part of your brain's going, no, you're good. And the other side is like, something is not right. And of course, now looking back, I know everything that wasn't right. But at the time, you just kind of feel crazy. I mean, any insecure, big, pregnant woman who walks into her husband's office and sees that has a moment of like, whoa, I'm not comfortable with this.
A week before, Ashley had told me that they were having trouble. She suspected some things going on between his paralegal, Candy, and him.
Unlike Emmett and Ashley's superficial relationship, Candy was experiencing a lot of turmoil in her marriage to Robert Hall. He was abusive, he was having an affair, and that's why she sought the comfort of someone else and started to stay at the office well past the end of working hours.
From what they said in court, their affair started in May, right after they met, and he didn't die till the next March. Around Christmas time, we were supposed to go to Emmett's family's house, and he called and told them we were sick, so we ended up staying home for the holiday. And that's when I started going, something is not right. Even Thanksgiving, I remember looking out, we were at my aunt's house, and he was just on his phone and not engaging with the kids. Just weird stuff at first. It wasn't anything big, but it was just like these little red flags kept going off. But by January, when my baby was born, I knew something was wrong.
I went to see Emmett at his new office. And I walked in the front. Candy's office was over to the right, and Emmett's was straight ahead. And there just seemed like there was a little bit too much when I saw her. Like, she looked like she was dressed for an evening at the bar. Not legal bar, the downtown bar. And it just seemed a little off. And that was my only encounter with her. And the next thing I heard was the week before Emmett was murdered that Emmett was having an affair with her. You know how you kind of get feelings about things?
We hadn't really spent any time together as a family. Like, all through law school, it was like, once this happens, then we're going to have our family back. So it was more just, I was kind of grieving this family that I thought we were going to have.
It was always, in the future, we're going to have time together. And then when, according to Ashley, when they were having this affair, it was, I got to go to Walgreens. I got to do this. And then he's gone for hours. You know, just knowing that she has 4 kids at that time. And then a 5th. And then he's gone a lot. So she had the burden of taking care of him.
March the 11th, 2011. Tensions are running high in the Corrigan home. Emmett tells Ashley he needs to make a trip to Walgreens. What he doesn't tell her is that he is meeting Candy there.
Little did Ashley know that at the same time, Candy was telling her husband Robert the same exact thing.
He left my house, went to Walgreens, picked Candy up, and they drove in his truck. And then she said that they went down and had sex in a neighborhood and down in Eagle.
At virtually the same time as Candy and Emmett were canoodling in the subdivision, her teenage daughter passed by the Walgreens and observed her mom's car in the parking lot. She thought that was strange, so she called her dad and said, "What is Mom doing at Walgreens?" Of course, he had no idea that she was there.
I went and got gas at Fred Meyer with Emmett, and then we were driving back. My daughter called, and she said, "Mom, where are you?" And I told her I was with Michelle, and that is my best friend Michelle, because I didn't want to tell her who I was with.
In response to his daughter's question, Rob called Candy's phone. It was actually Emmett that answered, saying, "What's up, Chief?" in a really threatening or condescending way. This could be what we consider the provoking incident. It might even be called passion provocation.
But no one could have predicted how far the violence would escalate. Meridian, Idaho, 2011. Emmett Corrigan is cheating on his wife Ashley with a work colleague named Candy Hall. When Candy's husband Rob catches her with Emmett, he erupts in a fit of anger and jealousy.
Rob called, and he calls me, and I pick up, and he's like, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I am out." He said, "Are you out with Emmett?" And I said, "I am." And he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "We're just talking." And then Emmett goes, "Let me talk to him." And then Emmett got really upset with Rob on the phone and said something like, I'll break your head."
I had heard Rob Hall's name one time. Right after Titus was born, we were heading to a movie, and Emmett had something weird on his Facebook. He was talking about Californians can talk the talk, but can they walk the walk? And I asked him about it. And he said, "Yeah, Candy's husband's really abusive, and I keep having to protect her from him, and we're trying to get restraining orders and all this stuff." So he had mentioned his name, but that's all I ever heard of him.
Unbeknownst to either Candy or Emmett, when Rob exited his vehicle, he had a gun out and at his side. This is outside the view of any of the cameras that captured what happened.
From what I learned in court, Rob Hall drove first to his parents' house to get a gun that Candy had given him for Christmas, and apparently it was his only gun that had a laser. So he picked up that gun and then went to Walgreens.
Rob heads to the Walgreens, hell-bent on finding his wife.
Rob Hall, all the while, is at Walgreens with his hands in his hoodie pocket. There's a video of him walking around. He walks around Walgreens a few times. You can tell on his face he's not happy.
He roams the aisle searching for Candy, never realizing that Candy and her lover Emmett were in Emmett's truck. Rob leaves the store and checks Candy's parked BMW. Then he gets back into his own pickup, pulls out, and then parks again on the other side of Candy's car.
He sits in his car for 7 minutes, and apparently that's when he makes the phone call that he talks to Emmett. And then you see him back out his car, and the camera's facing this way, and his car moves out of the view of the camera.
17 minutes later, Candy and Emmett pull up to see Rob. What they don't know is that he has a gun in his pocket and is in a jealous rage.
For a while, you see people moving, and then there's like a quiet moment, and no cars are in the parking lot. Nobody else is around, and that's when people heard the gunshots and the 911 call.
Rob provoked Emmett, saying, "Why don't you go home to your wife? You have 5 kids at home." And that set Emmett off. He pushed off his truck and he came at Rob, and Candy says she turned around to leave and never saw what happened.
Why do you need police, fire, or paramedic?
There was gunshots. The Walgreens, when I drove by, there were 2 people down.
All units 10-3. It now appears as though shots are being fired. All officers use caution.
Candy heard 3 shots ring out. She saw both Emmett and Rob fall to the ground. She ran to Emmett first and realized that he had been shot in his chest and head. She then turned to Rob and saw that he had a graze wound on his head. Realizing that Emmett was more mortally wounded, she ran to Emmett and rendered aid.
Emmett got out of the truck, and I got out, and I stood there, and Rob came up, and Emmett's a very aggressive man. He's body built, so he's really pumped up all the time. And, he got like this close up to Rob's face. And I remember, and I go, hey, knock it off. This is ridiculous. And I hear pop, pop, and then pop. And that's all I heard. And I turned around, and both of them are laying on the ground.
Out of the corner of her eye, she sees Rob reach for the gun and start to pick it up. She turns, grabs the gun out of his hand, and basically throws it across the parking lot as if it were a bowling ball. So the gun is now displaced and removed from that area where the crime took place.
Rob shot Emmett twice before turning the gun on to himself.
He was shot once in the head and once in the heart. Because Rob had weapons training. He worked for the sheriff's department. It was the IT department, but you still have to go through all the training.
And then I ran over it, and I was pretty stunned at that point. I was like, what in the world? I didn't even know what the pop was. It almost sounded like balloons popping. Emmett was kind of like on his, like this, and I didn't know what was going on, and I just see all this blood gushing down his rough face. So I went over and I covered. He had this wound on his top of his head, not covered. I'm calling 911. He's walking forward, and I see him going down, and I'm like, because I didn't know what he was grabbing for, because I didn't even see it, because it's little. So I grabbed it, and I was holding on to his shirt because it looked like he was going to fall, and I grabbed the gun, and I go, no. And I'm like, no, you need to sit down, no. And I took it, and I threw it in the street.
Candy frantically calls 911. Police arrive on the scene to find a hysterical woman and 2 men shot.
Emmett succumbs to his injuries and dies at the scene. Rob's self-inflicted wound is superficial, and police quickly apprehend him.
Police swarm the Walgreens and arrest Rob Hall on the spot.
Of course, because this was a homicide, Rob was arrested and charged with murder and ended up posting $1 million bail. One of the terms of that bail was that he'd not have any contact with Candy.
When Rob was bailed out, they spent a week together. And from the time he got out of jail to the time that we were in court, her testimony had totally changed.
She called me and she said, he posted bail and he's out. I couldn't believe it either. But I think his parents got a mortgage on their house. Something like that. I'm not exactly sure. But that was really strange that they would allow that.
It was at the scene that the police questioned both Candy and Rob and asked them why they were at the Walgreens, and Rob freely admitted that he had gone to the Walgreens after his daughter had not been able to reach his wife and saw her vehicle at the parking lot in Walgreens. And when he arrived there, he confronted Emmett. Candy told police that when she arrived home from work that evening, she had found Rob packing boxes, and then he said to her, the marriage is over. And that's why she left and went to Walgreens to seek support and comfort from Emmett. Candy also admitted to police that she and Emmett had talked about their failing marriages, had gone to the gas station, and then went to the place where they parked and had sex.
Fueled by jealousy, Candy's husband Rob chose to take Emmett's life, leaving his wife Ashley widowed and alone to take care of their 5 young children.
The night he died, I finally got the courage to say something like, you haven't slept in our bed for a few weeks now. And when you don't want to be intimate with me, it makes me think either I don't do it for you anymore or someone else is. And he literally went quiet, which for me it was like, well, maybe he has nothing to say. But now looking back, I'm like, he was just hiding all of the things that he should have told me right then. The detectives tell me I text and called him at about 10:15. That's when the panic really hit. I was having a panic attack, and I just kept trying to get a hold of him with no answer. And about midnight, I guess the baby fell asleep after screaming. He had never cried so hard. He felt it too. We both just kind of cried and bounced for hours, but he fell asleep, and then I finally was like, all right, I guess I'm going to sleep. I don't know what else to do. He won't answer my phone calls. So I laid down, and all I remember is a pound at my door, just hard pounding on my door. And I woke up almost excited, like maybe he got in a wreck. He's at the hospital. He needs us. He's going to see us. We're going to walk in. He's going to have one of those Beauty and the Beast rooftop moments where he sees his family and all that he has, and he's going to appreciate it. And instead, it was these 3 people just dressed in street clothes and, asking to come in and talk to me. And eventually, they talked me into allowing them to come in, and we sat on my black couch, and the man that turned out to be the detective on the case just said it all at once. Do you know a Candy Hall? Do you know her husband, Rob? Do you know that they were at Walgreens tonight? And by the way, your husband was shot once in the forehead and once in the heart, and he died in Candy's arms. Just all at once. I honestly, it's still just kind of broken pieces of words, but that feeling of insignificance that I already felt, not knowing what was wrong, only grew stronger as I found out the facts of everything he was doing and everything that was done to him that night.
Carla is my wife. I turned my phone off at night. My daughters were trying to call me. I couldn't get through, so they called her, woke her up. She drove over to my house, and then we went over to Ashley's house. And, it's the middle of the night. The kids are still asleep. And now it's time for the kids to get up. I think that's probably one of the most difficult things I've ever done, is to tell the twins, Boston and Bailey, that their daddy died that night. And I'll never forget. I forget which one of them said it. We told them that their daddy died, and the little girl, my daddy died. It's like, that'll get you. We didn't go to bed that night. We were up all night, and then the rest of the day was kind of a blur. We were gone, and then we were back together, and it's just more of trying to process something like that. And it certainly didn't happen that morning. The rest of the day was kind of a blur. We were gone, and then we were back together, and it's just more. We didn't know about really what had happened at the funeral. I can tell you that. We didn't know really what happened. And I felt so sorry for his dad. His dad was there, and he wants to think the best of his son. And I don't blame him. And he was talking, and I think he just had hope, that Emmett was talking to her. He was just meeting with her because she was going through a divorce and trying to help her. And then it came out that it was actually a lot worse than that. A man gets betrayed by his wife. I mean, I can see why he'd be angry. I called into the morning talk show here in town the day after, and the guy on the DJ actually asked me about that. And I said, it's one thing to be angry, leave the gun home.
I mean, the hate that you feel when you find out someone was sleeping with your spouse is real. I believe his motive was to just end the affair so he didn't have to feel that pain anymore. And I know one of the last things he said to Emmett was like, think about your wife and your kids back at home. And I always have felt a little confused when he was asking Emmett to think of us, but he himself didn't. Like, there's so many other options besides a gun, besides taking a life.
I don't know Rob. I know that they were having trouble, and it came out in the news that he was having an affair. And so, one big happy family.
Some who knew Emmett wondered if his sudden bursts of anger could be linked to roid rage.
Our relationship was always pleasant and friendly, but over the last, I would say, year to a year and a half, things seemed to be different with Emmett. A little bit aggressive, kind of a hard edge on him. You know, I know why, because of the drugs, the steroids, and, you know, people tend to get a little, you know, pumped up, shall we say, when they do that. But his responses with the kids and a response with me one time just seemed off. From what I heard from his half-brother was steroids and pseudoamphetamines. So he was getting up really early in the morning and going to the gym and working out a lot. So he was getting really pumped up, built, you know, muscles were getting bigger and bigger. And that had to have had an effect on him. Maybe skewed his judgment. I mean, I want to give him the benefit of the doubt. I don't know for sure. I always liked him. He was great in the family, and pretty shocking.
As the court case approaches, both families prepare for their private lives to come under public scrutiny. In Meridian, Idaho in 2011, after a tense confrontation with his wife Ashley, Emmett Corrigan goes to Walgreens to meet his colleague Candy Hall, with whom he is having an affair. Candy's husband Rob manages to track them down, and after the intense confrontation, Rob shoots Emmett dead in a jealous rage. Now it is time for him to stand trial.
For 4 weeks, there was a lot of media attention around this case.
After a murder, you're just thrown in the legal process instantly. They're sitting on your couch telling you everything, and the next day they're there picking up computers and phones, and I wanted them to know everything. Like, I didn't want him to miss anything, so I literally turned over everything he had at work and spent a year and a half in the legal system trying to help them find the truth. The process of turning over everything was more like a hope that they would find evidence of all sorts of things. I wanted evidence that he still loved me. I wanted evidence of, I don't even know. It was just, you're constantly hoping they find something that makes you feel better or heals something inside of all the broken pieces. But being in court, I found it to be very stifling and borderline abusive. Like, you literally sit there and they talk about a human life that was taken as if he was nothing. Everyone who commits a crime is protected in the court system because they're not allowed to use past discretions against you. So it's basically evidence of that night, and that is it. However, the victim, they can use all sorts of past anything for him. Rob's testimony was a lot about he didn't remember what happened, but his defense also brought a lot of he was defending himself, which for me, defending yourself can't happen if you don't remember what happened. So he never did testify, but the story for me didn't add up, because if you can't remember something, you can't remember what you were defending.
There was a trial date, and then we got pretty close to it, and then they did a continuance, and so Ashley was just, you know, she wanted to have a little closure from that. So that was really tough when that was going on for her. It just like strung it out for a long time. And then when it finally did come, you know, I think she had some hope of some kind of, I'm going to feel better or something, but I really don't think she did. You know, he was convicted, but it doesn't bring Emmett back.
On the last day of the trial, this brand new cafe opened up. So everybody was down there eating lunch, and as I went to fill up my drink, Rob's sister was right there, and I just got this, I don't know, it was more Like, let her know that you are sorry she's going through this. And we just had one of those kind of conversations. And it was really a cool moment, actually. And the jury was out, and they kind of had stuffed me in this back room to wait. And I was told a little late. So by the time I got to the back of the courtroom, the judge was already standing and announcing the verdict. And for the first time, I had a different view. I was in the back of the courtroom instead of on the victim's side. And it was the weirdest, like, slow motion. The judge is standing, he's announcing the verdict, and I thought it was going to be this pinnacle of my healing, and this guy's going to go to jail, and everything's going to be better. And instead, for the first time, I saw in the courtroom these two families, this mom over here and this mom over here, who I hadn't talked to Emmett's mom much since he died. And I just felt this overwhelming, like, everybody's hurting. No matter what happens, no matter what the judge says, everybody lost. And it was almost more than I could take.
Rob was found guilty and sentenced to 30 years for second-degree murder and is eligible for parole in 2030.
Rob Hall filed an appeal with the Idaho Court of Appeals, arguing that the judge erred in failing to properly instruct the jury of his justifiable homicide defense by admitting testimony about Rob's gun being out of the holster at the time of the shooting. This shows intent because the holster was still in Rob's truck when he fired the two shots into Emmett. The appeals court did not find error in those actions and unanimously upheld Hall's conviction on the 21st of October, 2015. The mood in the courtroom was very emotional. Rob's demeanor throughout the trial was that he was sorry and remorseful.
Candy was deemed to be an incredible witness because she kept changing her story, and the judge really didn't take well to that. So she really did not consider Candy to be a credible and trustworthy witness.
Are you and Emmett involved in a romantic relationship?
No.
Have you ever been romantic, Emmett?
No.
Okay, now let's say sexual. Have you been sexual with Emmett?
No.
Candy also spent time in jail after that. She apparently was embezzling money from her former employer. She had a PayPal account that was almost identical to her boss's. She would take the retainer fee and put $10,000, $5,000 of it in her account and $5,000 in her boss's account. Here they are, both parents were in jail. Their children went to the same high school that my children went to.
You know, I've thought for all these years, trying to make sense of why he chose her, why he was fighting for her when he died. Instead of staying home and fighting for me and for his amazing children. And I think it's that same feeling, like we all get those feelings of insignificance. And I don't know what caused his, maybe it was something in his childhood or some belief that he had, but he let that feeling grow and tried to fill a void with what I would say is a lesser value than what he already had. But when you feel insignificant, sometimes you really can't see that that's what you're doing.
These cases in which you have a three-way relationship, this relationship or sexual triangle, are very difficult, and they're not uncommon because you have competing forces. So I find it kind of ironic that Rob, who was cheating on Candy, would actually become so enraged that he would take someone's life because she was cheating on him. It's almost like a double standard.
Emmett's murder, fueled by betrayal, jealousy, and rage, leaves both families permanently affected.
I went through waves of feeling sorry for Rob in a way, like knowing the feelings that he was going through and the hurt that you feel with affairs. And then I went through waves of just hating him for not thinking of my kids and putting my family through this hell.
It's not uncommon in cases such as this. You know, in his mind, it was okay for him to stray from their marriage, but not for her. And he allowed his emotions to overcome him to the point where he killed and was convicted of that.
My kids grew up when that gun went off, but they have a compassion for people that I know they wouldn't have without this story. They are so caring and loving that they are my greatest examples. This story didn't break them, and that's what I'm so proud of. This story gave them a life of really thinking about other people and what other people go through.